against the Indian removal policy. You could see it in the abolitionist newspapers. He was also one of the earliest male feminists, of the supporting women's rights and all that, but also native rights to stay in their homelands and not be forcibly removed to Indian territory. Here's another guy, maybe even more so, but not as well known as Frederick Douglass. And a lot of people haven't been taught anything about the anti-slavery movement in America's schools. All they tell you is, and this happened right before the Civil War. Okay, now let's talk about the Civil War. And they skipped abolitionism because that was one of the most powerful resistance movements in American history. It lasted much longer than the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. It had much more breadth and intergroup alliances. It was a very powerful time of alternative thinking, breaking down all kinds of boundaries and barriers beyond just anti-slavery. The women's rights movement being a big one, but also communal movements, economic movements, all kinds of things. That's what I'm about to teach this last semester of my career. So William Nell, and I don't know if he was part native. He's definitely a mixed African New Englander from Massachusetts, but he was the press man for the biggest abolitionist newspaper, William Lloyd Garrison's Liberator, the Liberator magazine. He started working for Garrison when he was 16 years old and continued throughout the movement and until he died. No, he died after the Civil War, that's right. So through the whole movement and slavery. And this is just one example of an article in that anti-slavery newspaper, and you can survey all of them and find throughout the 1830s and 40s anti-Indian removal articles. Why? What did the abolitionists care about the natives? Well, some of them were humanitarian, of course, they were human rights activists, but they also saw that the reason that the removal policy focused on the tribes of the South, because that was the best place to grow the most profitable crop, agricultural crop in America at that time, cotton. It was 8 times more profitable than the number 2 crop. It was the most, by the time that the Civil War breaks out, it's like over 50%, 58% of the export revenue in America was from cotton and cotton products, textiles and all of that. It was the big money maker of the whole pre-Civil War era beginning around 1820. That was why they wanted to push the Cherokees and the Muskogees and all the Choctaws and other nations out of the South. They weren't really, the Removal Act wasn't focused on people like the Osanet Wampanoags who only had about a quarter acre of land left, and the landless tribes of the East. They were trying to get to the place where you could grow more cotton, and the abolitionists saw that this would expand slavery. It would make slavery almost unbreakable if they took the whole Deep South. They don't teach that, even in NAS programs. I've talked to other people who just miss that whole point when they're talking about the Indian Removal Act. It's connected to the larger economic interest. Follow the money, people. That's how you find out what the motivations are behind all this stuff. Okay, I got a lot to talk about. I was going to be fast. I want to get to the 1960s, by golly. I want to get to the present. Okay, Pequot guy, also an abolitionist, William Apis. He left the Pequot Nation and went to live with the Mashpee Wampanoags. He wrote articles like this one for the Liberator newspaper, other abolitionists. The next step, removal, Trail of Tears. This famous photograph, this famous painting shows some of the Afro-Cherokee members. And it wasn't just the Africans who were slaves of some Cherokees. They had free people of African and mixed African Cherokee ancestry in their tribe. There's all kinds of them over in Oklahoma that try to deny that. But here's this painting from that era. There's a African, doesn't look like a slave. He's got his own horse there riding along with him. And there's another one driving a covered wagon. So the Trail of Tears, there's a, well, the other thing is I tell everybody, it's not just one Trail of Tears. You have 67 tribal nations, both east and west of the Mississippi, forcibly exiled to what we now call Oklahoma. Doesn't that mean there's like 67 Trails of Tears? I get so ticked off when I hear the Cherokees are the only ones crying. Okay, enough of that. I didn't mean to beat on that issue too much. Okay. So before we go to this modern era in the 60s and all that, what happened in the interim between the removal, the Civil War, and all of that is the growing academic field called anthropology, post-Civil War on into even the 1960s. They were pretty much the academic voice of white supremacy. And one of their biggest doctrines that they attempted to push is that all inferior, primitive people, I hate to use this language, this is what they printed in their textbooks, and they're all going to become extinct. And these are the values that all of the American school system was teaching, is the values of aggressive capitalism, predatory consumption, overproduction, all of that, are the values we want to encourage. The values of indigenous people who live in harmony with the earth, not trying to control the earth, was what they were trying to discourage. At the same time this happens in academia, the boarding schools are created, beginning in 1879. And what are they teaching indigenous children? Your tribal cultural values are inferior. They won't make you a good capitalist. You'll never learn the value of $1. Join our way of seeing the world. The earth isn't your mother, it's just a thing that you can prod and probe and use and abuse any way you see fit. And this was part of the whole regimen of American education curriculum. And it wasn't just being taught to people of color, it's taught to everybody. And that's why we have a lot of these set notions. More is better than less. All of that. Faster is better than slow. All of those things that weren't part of our indigenous worldview. And we're brainwashed. I include myself. I grew up in that world. And I've been fighting the brainwashing ever since I realized I was brainwashed. I think when I was about 15 years old, it started to kick in because I was hanging out with the hippies, that's why. Dang it. No, I'm just telling you. What happened to George? Okay. One of the big culminating events of white supremacist anthropology, 1904, St. Louis World's Fair, officially titled the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, because it was 100 years from the Louisiana Purchase and from Lewis and Clark coming out and saying, yeah, we're going to own all this. You people of the plains, you got to get used to us or leave or whatever, And so they got indigenous people from all over the world. I don't know how they brought or coerced people from all over the world. The Philippine Islands, the Ngoro people of one of the many Philippine islands of indigenous people. They had Chinese of China, indigenous people. They had African indigenous people and many U.S. American and South American. And they put them on display. Come, folks, take your last look at these people before they become extinct. And they also had pavilions at the fair for the boarding school kids from America, showing this is the only way to save them. Indoctrinate them into our ways, teach them how to use our machines and our cultural values and all of that. That was all part of this World's Fair, 1904. Okay, I like this guy. I don't know why. He's saying something. I don't know what it is. Yeah, okay. Now we're going to move into the 60s. I got a little word here from Jack Forbes, co-founder, one of the, if not the first Native American Studies program in the country at UC Davis in '67. Jack Forbes, Lenape, Rappahannock, and he imagined he also probably had some African ancestry like so many of the Virginia tribes and the people of that area. And there, if you can't read this, what it says is, if we have African blood, we should be proud of it. It is good, honest tribal ancestry. Jack D. Forbes, and he's also the author of one of my favorite books called Columbus and Other Cannibals. Highly recommended to you. The only thing is there's no African tribe, no tribe called the Africans. But you know what he means. You know what he means there. Okay, when I was getting the slides for this one, the Lumbee Nation of North Carolina, who drove the KKK out of their homelands in 1958, I looked at the date. Look at that date. Sound familiar? That's today. Today is the 60th anniversary of this incident I'm about to tell you about. I had no idea when I was planning all this that we're coming on this anniversary. But the Lumbee Nation is, population-wise, the largest tribe of the eastern United States. Third largest tribe in the whole country, over 60,000 people. But they're not federally recognized. A big part of the reason of that is because a lot of the Western tribes, whenever they come up for recognition, they'll go lobby Congress against it because the Lumbees will take too big a piece of the pie of federal dependency on the BIA dollars and all that. And so they don't care. They know who they are. And federal recognition would be nice, but they're just going to keep being who they are. Anyway, and so January 18th, 1958, the KKK in North Carolina is planning a big rally. And the Lumbees went to the location of the rally grounds, were there before they arrived. And when those Klansmen started getting out of their pickups and whatever, they come out with rifles and sticks even before they can get their hoods on, you know. I was looking at the guy, that's a Klansman. Oh, he didn't even get a chance to put his uniform on. And they're out there with guns and clubs saying, get the hell out of our country. Now, they didn't have a reservation. They didn't have the United States permission to call their eastern North Carolina homeland their country. They just said, this is our country. Get the hell out. And I guess some shots were fired. Some people were injured. No Klansmen pressed any charges against these guys. And you can see they captured the KKK flag banner. And awesome. And that was 1958. As the civil rights movement's beginning to pick up speed. 1968. I don't know much about this photo. I think it's in Alabama or Mississippi, but I know that guy's not a Mardi Gras Indian. You know? So rest assured, I'm not sure what tribe he is. I have to look it up. I don't even remember where I got this photo. But this is just part of that intersection that we're looking at. I want to get into something a little more vital at the same time. These guys and these guys. And what did they have in common, and in what ways were they allies? The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, you don't usually hear their whole name. You usually just hear the Black Panthers. Ooh, scary, scary. They're black and they got claws or something like that. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was part of a larger movement after the Civil Rights Law was passed, and there's still many people in that movement working towards integration and equality in American society. The people that were also called Black Nationalist, Black Panther Party, were saying, well, how much do you want to join those people? You know, and you want to just grow up to be just like them? Or you know, what's this goal of equality? That's a good goal as far as avoiding discrimination, being able to live at peace and all of that. But is the end result to just become another corporate CEO predator and create more of the stuff that's destroying our planet? Is that the goal of equality? And people started to say that. Do we want to take on their cultural affectations and walk like them, talk like them, dance to their music, all of that stuff, you know? These guys weren't really ready to get into country music or anything like that, you know. They didn't see assimilation, conformity to the Euro-based mainstream as a legitimate goal. And that's what gets lost in all of the reporting on the Black Panthers. And indigenous activists, that was part of the fabric of their consciousness. You know, our goal isn't to become just like the colonialists. We want to remain tribal nations to whatever extent we can have true sovereignty under this present circumstance and all of that, and keep our traditions and our cultures and our ways of life. You know, now for the Africans, a lot that had been washed away hundreds of years ago, and they're struggling to create some kind of authentic identity. That's what the Black Panthers are really trying to do. Not really knowing where to turn to. And I'll just tell you one little funny thing is the idea that the language of East Africa, and I lost it again. I was afraid I'd lose that name. Anyway, okay, I thought that might happen because I had to look it up when I was getting ready. And well, the language of the people of Kenya and Mauritania in that area is a big language group. Anyway, they thought, well, so that was the only African language they'd ever heard of. So that's the black man's true language, you know.